What's up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach KT Smith. What's up, Coach? How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Ready to talk about the NFL. A lot of exciting stuff going on here as we hit the midway point.
It's hard to believe. It makes me sad to think that we're already halfway through the NFL season because the offseason is so long. But we do want to do some midseason awards, and we're going to get to that here in this episode. But before we do that, there was a lot of crazy stuff that happened in week 9 that I think we wanted to discuss a little bit before we get started. What stood out to you, though, from the week 9 games that we've seen so far?
Well, I thought there were some remarkable performances, some individual plays that were mind-boggling. I mean, Saquon Barkley doing some kind of a reverse ninja hurdle of Jaguars defenders in that same game with the Eagles. Devonta Smith making a ridiculous one-handed catch for a touchdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown in the Detroit Green Bay game in the pouring rain. I had one of the most fantastic sort of double moves where he came in motion and just sort of double moved the corner and then was able to catch a ball over his shoulder up against the boundary and toe tapped his feet for a touchdown. I just think the individual talent in the league is utterly remarkable, and you're seeing these guys do these things athletically that are just absolutely out of this world. It's a freak show in a way, man. It's a pleasure to watch.
Do you think that ahead of week 9, the NFL sent all officials a memo that said, try to eject players as much as you can from games? Like, what the hell was that about?
Yeah,
I
the
mean,
Brian Branch ejection was embarrassing.
yes,
I mean, what I don't understand what an ejection. I don't know what the rule book says exactly, but it's got to be malicious intent, right? Don't you think
right.
that's got to be the underlying thing?
Totally agree. Totally
Yeah.
agree. And then Puka Nakua got ejected for throwing a punch. I mean, meanwhile, we're seeing guys punch each other with, they're wearing helmets. I don't understand where it's ejection worthy. It's not as if I don't want to bring this up, but I will. Like someone took a helmet off of someone's head and then hit them with it. Like it's not that. I
That would
mean,
never
but
happen, Jeff.
no, it's pure speculation. But anyways, I just think this is I don't know. And then did you watch the Eagles? Did you watch the Eagles Jaguars game?
Yes.
How in the hell is the Saquon Barkley fumble that was recovered by Tavon Walker and returned for a touchdown after replay clearly shows the defender makes contact with his foot when he goes down? How is that upheld, Coach? I've been screaming this, and I don't want to take away anything from these players that do a great job, and they are really, really talented. But it just seems like on a weekly basis, here I am talking about how the officiating sucks and it's taking away from the game. It's just awful. I think it's reaching new levels every week.
The league doesn't know what they want to do as far as the game is concerned. They want to make the game safer, but they don't know how to do that in real time. And they don't have definitions for these things. What is pass interference? There's a nebulous notion of what pass interference may or may not be. What is an ejectionable action?
Right. Yeah.
There's this nebulous that they don't have hard and fast definitions for these things. They're kind of making it up as they go along. Each crew, because there's so much gray area, each officiating crew, in the big studio in New York, wherever the eye in the sky is, you've got this human element. So it's so subjective. To one person, it may be A, to another person, it may be B. The discontinuity is a huge problem for players because more than anything, what coaches and players want is consistency. So they know how to act. Right. So if they like they banned the hip drop tackle, but now it's never called a penalty. Right. So am I allowed to do it or not? Right. I mean, Brian Branch's hit was clearly a penalty because it came late, but he didn't lead with his head. It wasn't done with malicious intent to injure. It was a bang bang physical play that under the current system is a penalty. But how you eject him is mind-boggling to me because some dude in New York decided that he could have avoided that hit if he had chosen to. But some other dude might say, well, no, I think it was appropriate for the moment. That inconsistency is maddening.
Well, and not to mention when they slow it down, when you're watching the game, they slow it down into the super slow-mo. Of course, it's going to look worse when you slow it down like that.
Right.
When it's happening in real time, you have to ask yourself as an official, was this an ejectionable play, however you say it? I got to say that even Puka Nakua taking a swing at someone, is one swing in a division game between the Rams and the Seahawks enough to get a guy booted from a game? I don't know. I agree with you. They don't know which direction they want to go, and I don't think they care either. But any big winners for you in terms it could be team, it could be individually from week 9 that you wanted to touch on?
Well, the Lions just went into Green Bay and smacked the Packers, man.
Yep.
In a rainstorm, pouring rain. Detroit's first outdoor game of the season. Every one of their games has been in a dome. And so you got to go to Lambeau, which is hard enough. B, you got to do it in a driving rainstorm. Jared Goff has another day where he has a ridiculous completion percentage. I can't remember what his final numbers turned out to be, but at one point in the game, he was like 13 for 14. I mean, they just look like right now the best team in the league. And I thought they made an emphatic statement, especially when they're missing their best defensive player in Aiden Hutchinson, who's out with that gruesome injury. And then arguably their next best defensive player, Brian Branch, gets ejected, and they just respond, man. They just seem to be a team that will overcome adversity no matter what it is.
I want to ask you a question about a game which pits two teams, and I can't figure these teams out to save my life. The Arizona Cardinals host the Chicago Bears. And so you got Caleb Williams, Kyler Murray, and I just can't. Did the Hail Mary against the Commanders break the Bears' back? Is question one. And two, are the Cardinals actually legitimate and potential playoff team? And they're still very much alive in the NFC West. What do you make of these two teams?
Well, we're going to do some awards in this show, so I'm going to revisit that Cardinals conversation.
Okay.
So I'll talk about the Bears quickly. I think the Bears are a team that has a lot of question marks because there's so many new pieces there. You've got a new offensive coordinator, you got a new quarterback, you got all these new, skill players that have been brought in. I think they're still trying to figure out their identity. And when you lose a game like you did last week to the Commanders on that Hail Mary, I think that's a moment where the coaching staff needs to really be able to make sure that everybody gets back on the same page, that you have a clear vision for how to proceed, that you don't start pointing fingers, because that happens in losses like that, man. People start to blame everybody. It was, I saw, I don't know if they sat Tyreek Stevenson, but he wasn't playing when I saw a little bit of that game early.
He supposedly left practice when he was told he wasn't going to start. Like he just bailed on the team. I don't know. Okay. I'm sure he was there, but I don't know if he traveled or not. I don't know.
He was on the sideline.
Okay.
So I think it was the right move to discipline him. If they had done nothing, we talked about this last week. If they had done nothing, that would have been a huge mistake. But I think that they're at a crucial point right now where this season could unravel on them because of the adversity that they're currently facing. They've hit their first rough patch of losing. It's compounded with the Stevenson drama. You've got a rookie quarterback. You've got, a lot of new pieces. Big moment, I think, now for Matt Eberflus. So I think what the Bears do next week will be really important.
I want to ask you one last question before we get to our midseason awards. It has everything to do with the fact that the NFL trade deadline is coming up this Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So let's look conference by conference. And I think that there are teams now that are saying, you know what? If we've got a guy, especially if he has a hefty contract and we can dump him, if we can get something for him, what is the Mendoza line, so to speak, of a record that you would think, okay, this team's probably going to be sellers big time at the, so like the 2-6 Dolphins, the 2-7 Patriots, the 2-7 Raiders, the 2-7 Browns, the Jaguars, Titans, 2-win teams. You go over to the NFC, you're looking at the 2-win Giants, and the 2-win Saints and Panthers. My God, Saints are 2-7. They started out 2-0. But anyways, what do you think about that in terms of how the teams finished the first 9 games of the first 9 weeks, depending on where their bye went, and then being potential trade sellers at the deadline?
Yeah, good question. Not all 2-win teams are equal.
That's
the
true.
2-win Dolphins are certainly not equal to the 2-win Panthers.
Yeah.
And so if you're Miami, you may not be able to salvage this season. I mean, it may be beyond you. You're not going to win the division. You've got to pretty much run the table almost to get a wild. You got to figure in the AFC, you need 10 wins to get to the wild card.
You would think,
so if you're 2-6, like Miami is, you got to go 8-1 on the backstretch. And that might be a bridge too far. But at the same time, last year, the Dolphins looked like an emerging potential AFC power. So they have to make a decision as to where they are. Are they that team? Are they that 2023 team that kind of got derailed by Tua's injury, but they still believe in their core? Because if they are, you're not a seller. You want to obviously try to build for next season, but at the same time, you're not saying, hey, we're going to start over. If you're Carolina, man, unload and build. You got a rookie head coach. You still got some question, a lot of young people, a lot of young players. You got a question mark at quarterback. But I mean, if you're Carolina, you're not thinking about this year at all. I mean, you're thinking about the future. So I think those two franchises in particular are in different spots.
What about your buddy Coach Stefanski up in Cleveland? They're 2-7. It seems like they're done. Would you be selling off any assets as much as you can to try and recoup some of the Deshaun Watson draft stock that you had to give up?
Well, they already have with shipping Amari
Amari
Cooper
Cooper.
out. So that I
Yeah,
think that signals a willingness maybe to move other pieces. As far as Coach Stefanski's employment is concerned, if you're going to be a seller, then that would suggest to me that he's safe.
that's
That you're going to
true.
bring him, unless the bottom falls out and they wind up 3-14 or something like that.
Right.
I would think that they may say, we like our core, and they still have when they're healthy. I mean, the Browns have been decimated by injuries, but when they have their best players available, they still have a strong core. So they may say, look, man, we're not going to get it done this season, but let's move some pieces that we feel like we can add assets in the offseason to this already, you know, pretty well established core.
And Zadarius Smith is the biggest name on that roster now that's being talked about as being moved. And maybe a team like Detroit, who's looking for a pass rusher in Aiden Hutchinson's absence with his injury. But we'll see. All right, let's shift gears and let's go to our midseason awards. We're officially at the halfway point. Let's talk about some of these so far in the first half. Let's start with the big one, League MVP. Who is the most valuable player in the National Football League? I'll let you go first.
Well, I'm going to join you on this one because I think you said this a couple of weeks ago, but I'm all in on Jared Goff now, man. I
Okay.
just the 5-week stretch that he put together prior to this past week, where he completed over 80% of his passes for 5 weeks combined, is mind-boggling. 80%. That is ridiculous. And then again, I don't remember what his final stats were on Sunday, but at one point he was like 13 for 14. So I'm sure it was up there high again. He's just playing great football, and they've got the mojo right now, man. They've got just something working in Detroit that feels formidable. They're beating good teams, and they're doing it convincingly. And he's the engine that's making that offense run. It's amazing how much he's kind of reinvigorated his career, and the pairing of he and Ben Johnson together has been tremendous. Detroit better make the best of this year because Ben Johnson's not going to be there next year. He's going to be a head coach somewhere else.
I would agree with Jared Goff, but if I was going to go with like a 1B or a second place, and of course it's going to be a quarterback, it's really hard for me to not think Jaden Daniels shouldn't get some votes. I'm not saying he would win it, but I feel like he would get probably in terms of the value they're bringing to their team. I think he'd get votes over Patrick Mahomes right now. And that sounds like sacrilege in terms of National Football League talk. But I mean, Jaden Daniels is playing some tremendous football. I watched a good bit of the game it was against the Giants, but it was on the road. But he's just so poised. And nothing seems to rattle him. It's
Yep.
very akin to CJ Stroud last year, his rookie year. So I'm sure you would probably agree that he'd get some votes too.
No doubt. And unquestionably over Mahomes because the defense in Kansas City has been really the storyline this year, more so than the offense. And
Would
I
you
think
give
that
go ahead.
what you said about Daniels is so appropriate. I watched some of that Giants game on Sunday as well. He just looks so fluid. When he leaves the pocket, it's not really a scramble. He doesn't really scramble out of the pocket. He like glides out of the pocket. His eyes are down the field all the time. He gets pressure in his face. He doesn't panic. He knows when to throw the ball away. I mean, he just does these things like you feel like this guy's been in the league for 6-7 years already. It's really uncanny for a rookie.
Would you think he would take votes away from Lamar? Because he's having a hell of a season too.
Yeah, I just feel as though there stylistically are going to be a lot of comparisons.
Yep.
Who's the better uh, in at the lower levels of football? You call them like the dual threat quarterbacks, but that's not really a thing in the NFL because they don't run the QB on designed plays as much. But they have a similar style, different animals, of course, in terms of their offensive systems and all. But I think that you're probably going to have this three-way race really between Jackson, Mahomes, and Daniels. I wonder if voters will hold it against Daniels that he's a rookie because only one rookie in the history of the league has won the MVP award, and that was Jim Brown,
Yeah.
way back when. So just because it's not been done, will they say like, "Hey, I don't, rookie of the year, yeah, league MVP, maybe that's a little too much right now."
All right, I'm going to spring this on you. Just give me a name. Give me a non-quarterback MVP.
Non-quarterback MVP. Well, the Pittsburgh Steeler fan in me wants to say TJ Watt because
Of
his
course.
impact on what the Steelers do is
Yeah.
so massive. If the Eagles continue to win, Saquon Barkley
There you
has
go.
become tremendously impactful in Philadelphia and has kind of like reshaped that offense. So they're they're quietly 6-2 right now, even though they're getting booed off the field in Philadelphia on Sunday. But that's just Philly. That's a
That was
normal
their
Sunday.
coach. Their coach is a freaking
They
moron.
hate
That's
they hate him. They hate him. I can I do this real quick? Oh, I know we're doing this show live. I have to read you just a text thread of Eagles fans. Right, these are Eagles fans. This is a text thread of Eagles fans that
okay.
I'm on. Mind you, they're 6-2 and they won on Sunday. They won.
Yeah.
The Eagles make me sick. This is painful. This is going to be the Eagles' worst loss ever. And it's on one person. That guy's a clown. They're talking about Sirianni. He does what Lurie's analytic guy tells him. He's a puppet. I mean, they're going off and about this guy, and they're winning. They're winning.
Yeah. Well, hey, the Steelers fan base isn't that far off because if they're winning, I've always said the Steelers could win a Super Bowl and people would say, yeah, well, they didn't stop the run well enough or something
Yeah.
like that. Like there would be critics. So, all right, let's go to coach of the year. So far, halfway through the season, who's your coach of the year?
So I think the obvious choice for me is Dan Campbell with what he's doing in Detroit. I think for the first 5 weeks, you looked at Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota and you said, wow, that's really impressive with Sam Darnold. Now they've lost 2 in a row. We'll see what happens with them on Monday night. But my dark horse is a team you brought up earlier. Well, I think what Jonathan Gannon is doing in Arizona
Yeah.
is really pretty remarkable, man. That is a roster that everybody I think thought, hey, they're a year away. They've got a lot of young guys. They brought in Marvin Harrison as their top pick. They Kyler Murray's not a young guy anymore, but it still feels like they're developing the offense there. And for them to be 5-4, now 5-4 is not spectacular, but they own big time division wins over the 49ers and the Rams. And they're finding ways to win football games. It just feels like if they go on and win the NFC West, which that everybody's got 4 losses or 5 losses, that's a tightly packed division. But if they go on and win that division, I think Jonathan Gannon deserves some consideration.
Absolutely. I have 2 coaches in mind. Andy Reid's got to be there, because we talked about the Chiefs and how the way that they're winning is not what we're used to seeing from Kansas City, but they're still winning. They're still undefeated. They're the
Yeah.
lone undefeated team. And that was going into Monday Night Football, which hasn't happened when we're recording this to let people know that that's if the case they lose to Tampa Bay on Monday night. That's why. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, I think Andy Reid has to be there. And another coach, I'm going to say because he had the huge cojones to make a move, and that's Mike Tomlin. If you ask most NFL coaches, if you're 4-2 and your team's starting to kind of find their footing, are you going to make a quarterback change at 4-2? I would bet 99% of them say, hell no, I'm going to stick with what's working. And he didn't. And he made the switch. He made the tough decision when most coaches wouldn't have made a decision at all. They would have just stuck it, and it's worked. Now, could it work in the second half? This is just first half. So I'm going to give a nod to Mike Tomlin as well. What do we think about this?
I think Mike Tomlin gets undervalued simply because of how good he is. I think
Yeah,
people don't really understand how hard it is to be consistently good the way that Mike Tomlin has been for so long. And I think that people outside of Pittsburgh probably don't recognize how much he does with the resources available to him. I mean, the Steelers, they've had obviously some very talented rosters in Pittsburgh over the years in his tenure there. But the last several seasons, that has not been a star studded roster, particularly on offense. And for them to continue to win football games, for them to be 6-2 right now and atop the NFC North is absolutely a tribute to how good a coach he is.
absolutely. All right, let's go to our next category, which I think there's only one answer, and I hope you're saying the same name I'm thinking of, and that's the coach most likely to be fired. Who are you thinking?
I think there's a bunch of answers, but for me, it's Dennis Allen.
Oh my
I,
gosh. Okay.
yeah,
I went in a different direction, but that's fine.
okay. I think they're a train wreck right now, man. I mean, that
They
team
are.
started off 2-0. They've now lost 7 in a row. I mean, they've lost some bad games. They lost to Carolina on
Yeah.
Sunday. And it just feels like that team is unraveling. I mean, there was a play in that game where Derek Carr threw a pass down the middle of the field. His receiver ran an out cut. The two of them looked at each other. They both threw their hands up. Carr, like, in frustration, off his chin strap and, just kind of like went to the sideline and just slumped down on the bench. He just looked like a defeated quarterback. And when that kind of a gloom settles over your franchise, you got big problems. So I
Yeah.
don't know how Dennis Allen gets out from under that. It felt like he was maybe on the hot seat going into this season, and this season is unraveling fast for the Saints.
Derek Carr almost got Chris Olave killed too.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's also not a good picture for him. I agree with you. Dennis Allen should be on the list, but Mike McCarthy. I mean, Cowboys lose again
yeah.
to Atlanta. Dak injures his hamstring. They have Cooper Rush in the game. This guy, I don't even know if he's going to survive the next week, let alone next season. I don't think the Saints are the type of organization that might fire a coach in season. I think the Cowboys absolutely are, and they will. So I was thinking Mike McCarthy. Who else do you think is on the hot seat?
I think Doug Peterson in
Yep.
Jacksonville. That season has gone south. I mean, they're 2-7. And this is 2 years removed from them kind of being the darlings of the league after that playoff upset. And everybody thought Trevor Lawrence was going to be the next great quarterback, and they signed him to the massive contract. So for them to be 2-7, that's obviously a huge problem for them. I think those are your three most likely candidates right now. Whether Jerry will pull the trigger on McCarthy midseason is interesting. Who does he have in house? Uh, you've got Mike Zimmer, the DC there, who's got head coaching
Yep.
experience, but that defense has been bad. So you will. I mean, there's people who think that Zimmer might be one and done after this season. So do you make him the interim coach? I don't know. That's a risky move, but it feels untenable in Dallas right now. Like you can't keep going down this road.
What do you think about Dayball?
I mean, he was the coach of the year 2 years ago. The Giants are like plucky. They put up a good fight.
Yeah,
Inevitably, though, 2 wins is 2 wins.
exactly.
The Maras, though, that ownership group in New York, I mean, they value stability. They're not one of those franchises that fires coaches consistently. So he may have a little bit of a longer leash.
Okay, fair enough. I was going to say rookie of the year. Do we even have to talk about this? I feel like we already did.
That's a done deal, man.
I agree. Okay,
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels, it is. What would you say, or who would you say is the biggest surprise of the season?
Well, I think the Commanders as a whole, who saw this coming, right? I mean, nobody, right? I mean,
No.
Jaden Daniels, a lot of people said, well, Caleb Williams is going to be the best quarterback out of that rookie class. And then who's next best? And so it was a debate about, oh, well, is Daniels going to be better than Drake May or Bo Nix or whatever? But I think that obviously he's established himself as not just the best rookie, but one of the best quarterbacks in the league right now. But it's more than him. They're playing good defense. Kingsbury's system right now is really clicking. They made some smart offseason signings, bringing in guys like Austin Eckler, like Frankie Lavu at linebacker, Bobby Wagner at linebacker. I mean, they brought in a really good mix of veterans to complement the young talent. It just feels like all their moves right now are paying off. And that's not something that you've been able to say about Washington in a long, long time.
Yeah. I got to say, the biggest surprise of the season for me has to be the Arizona Cardinals. And I agree with you about Washington, but the Arizona Cardinals being 5-4 now, they're currently first place in the NFC West. The 49ers had a bye this week. And you didn't see it happen. You talked
No.
about the coach recently. I would have bet money that this wasn't even going to happen. I would say a close second would be the Minnesota Vikings once JJ McCarthy went down. For them, with Sam Darnold, to somehow, some way be in second place in the division and being vying for, I mean, hell, they were undefeated up until 5-0, and they've struggled a little bit recently, but still interesting though. Those two teams are biggest surprises for me. What about the other side, Coach? What's their biggest disappointment this year?
uh, you could probably compile a decent list here, but I'll go with the
Yes.
Jets.
Okay.
All the hype that went with the Jets, all the moves they made in the offseason. They spent a lot of money. They brought in all of Aaron Rodgers' favorites and some marquee defensive players. And for them to be where they are right now, I know they won their last game, but at the same on Thursday night, but at the same time, I think that they've got problems that go, sort of beyond where they are at the current moment. I don't think Rodgers is the answer. He looks like a 40-year-old quarterback right now, and New York just has a history of imploding. So whether or not that victory last week can kind of get them going will be interesting to see. But if we're talking about mid-season, to me, they're a huge disappointment.
I'm going to go with a team that might surprise you. My biggest disappointment is the Miami Dolphins. And I'll tell you why. It's the fact that Tua has a history of injury. And Mike McDaniel and your staff did not prepare the team for another potential injury. You came into the year with Skylar Thompson as your backup. Say what you want about Skylar Thompson, his time at Kansas State. He was a 7th round draft pick and in one of the worst draft classes in NFL history in terms of quarterbacks. And then you bring in Tyler Huntley as like a Band-Aid to try and fix things. How they haven't said, we need a legitimate backup that if something happens to Tua and he misses 4 weeks or however long he did with his most recent concussion, that's on them. Like, that's bad. Like, that's bad preparation. That's not giving your team a legitimate chance, especially when there's quarterbacks like a Joshua Dobbs out there. And I think he's on a roster somewhere. I think it might have been it might be San Francisco. But still, Joshua Dobbs would have been a great safety valve for them in case something happened to keep the team afloat. We've talked about him before and how he's good in short stints, but not for a full season. I'm going to say that the biggest disappointment for me is that they have no plan B in Miami, and you've seen exactly what happens.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially when you consider the fact that their offense is so reliant on Tua's skill set, his quick delivery, his accuracy, all the RPOs, all that stuff, man. It takes a quarterback who's really well trained in those things. And to not have a backup who can do that or do some semblance of that, you're right. That's irresponsible.
All right, let's go to this. Is going to be interesting. Which team is most likely to earn the number 1 overall draft pick? So this is going to be, and I know that we have check out our Fans First football show with Brian Davis and a bunch of others, and one of them is Nick Hogan, who likes the Patriots, and he's like, man, I want the Patriots to have the number 1 overall pick. Like, he's really excited to see if the Patriots could lose enough games. They're 2-7 coming off a loss to the Titans. The Titans are right there with them though at 2 wins. Who do you think, Coach, would have the number 1 overall draft pick in 2025?
It's a hot competition, man. We got about 6 or 7 2-win teams in the league right now. The Panthers, the Titans, the Patriots. To me, they're in a 3-way race to the bottom for that distinguished award. And I like the phrasing, who will earn the number 1 pick, because you earn it. You do earn it by sucking. So I just think that the Panthers are just an untalented football team. And they eke that win out over New Orleans, and that's a bad loss for the Saints. But they've got Bryce Young back at quarterback, and I don't know if that's sustainable, especially when they've already basically said, we have given up on him. And so and they replace him with Andy Dalton, and then Dalton gets hurt, and they got to put Bryce Young back in. And he was actually okay on Sunday, but I don't
Yep.
know if that's sustainable. I mean, New England might be able, because they've got a fairly decent defense and they can run the ball a little bit. They might be able to eke out a couple of wins. Tennessee, that division's not very good. You got Jacksonville in there and Indy. So I don't know. I think to me, it's the Panthers' pick to lose.
It could be, but they're also in a really bad division where they could scrape some of these, like you saw on Sunday when they beat the Saints. I'm going to say my dark horse team for the number 1 overall draft pick is the Cleveland Browns. And
Ooh,
the reason why is they're in a tough division
yeah.
and they still have a lot of division games left. And if you watch that game where they lost to the Chargers on Sunday, Jameis Winston, well, boy, did the shine rub off. Was not there for a second straight week. He was under pressure. He was missing throws. The Chargers were just harassing him on
Yeah.
every drop back. He got sacked a bunch. It just looked like a team that's getting ready to sell off some assets as well. I could see them saying, look, if we only win 4 games, so be it. We'll get a high pick. That's my dark horse team to be the number 1 overall pick. All right. And they'll probably screw that up anyway. So I'm fine with that. So let's go to one more thing here. What is your bold second half prediction? So if you're thinking of a bold prediction for the second half of the season, what would it be?
So there's a part of me that wants to say that the Kansas City Chiefs will finish the season 16-1. And that's because I look at their schedule. They're 7-0. And I think that there's a pretty good chance that they're going to get they have a big showdown November 17th at Buffalo. And their next 2 games are both at home against Tampa Bay and Denver. And I think they're going to win them both. And I think they're going to go into Buffalo 9-0. And that's going to be a great football game, man. I can't wait to watch that game. But after that Buffalo game, they play Carolina, Vegas, the Chargers at home, the Browns, Houston at home, Pittsburgh at home, and they end the season at Denver.
But Pittsburgh's on the road. That's in Pittsburgh.
Oh, that's in Pittsburgh. Okay.
Yeah.
So where are the losses? Granted, somebody could get hurt. There could be an upset. But I just don't know. With the way that they're playing defense and the fact that their offense will probably get better as the season goes, I just don't see a slate of upcoming opponents that's very daunting, other than maybe that trip to Buffalo and perhaps that trip to Pittsburgh. So I don't think they're going to go undefeated because, man, 17-0 is just too darn difficult to do. But there's never been a 16-1 team in the NFL because we've only been running the 17-game schedule a couple years. So I guess my bold prediction is they will be the first 16-1 team in league history.
All right. That makes me want to puke. But anyways, I'm going to say my bold prediction for the second half is that 2 divisions are going to have 3 teams represented in the playoffs this year. And they're both going to be the Conference North divisions. I think the NFC North with the Lions, Vikings, and Packers make the postseason. And I think the AFC North, and you might be saying, okay, Jeff, the Steelers and Ravens, I think the Bengals are going to come back. They're 4-5. They're coming off a win against the Raiders still. I know Desmond Ridder was a quarterback, but nonetheless, I think this team is too good. They're playing a last place schedule. I think they're going to win a lot of games in the second half, and I think they're going to punch their ticket as a wild card. So that's my bold prediction that the AFC and NFC North will have 3 teams represented in the postseason. Could you see it happening, Coach?
Sure. I think that's very likely to happen. Yeah, especially when you consider how weak some of the other divisions are. Like the NFC West is probably only going to get 1. The way it looks right now, the South is only going to get 1. I mean, maybe they could get Tampa Bay might be a second, but in the AFC, obviously there's the East is only going to get 1. So yeah, I mean, there's a good chance that could happen.
Maybe that wasn't as bold as I thought. All right. This has been a lot of fun. We'll see how the second half plays out. But, Coach, what's coming up on the call sheet this week? You figured that out yet?
We're still working on a few ideas, man. It's a busy week for me with us. We have playoff football here in South Jersey, so we're crunching the numbers there with everything going on. But we've been talking a little bit about schemes. Like we did a big thing on the West Coast offense last week because because we were doing episode number 80. And so I wanted to talk about maybe some defensive counterparts to that. I got an email from a guy who's been listening to the show for a long time, who was asking me about different coverages, and he was like, he didn't understand cover 6, cover 7, things like that. And I said, oh, maybe we'll take a little bit of time and try to explain a little more scheme stuff now, or work that into the conversation.
Well, what's a preview of the playoff game, man? It's the Ocean City Red Raiders versus who?
10-0, top seeded Somerville, which is 2 hours north of us, up near New York City. So we got a 2-hour bus ride to go play the top seed in our section. So yeah, we shall see.
Is there any way you can stream that game for those that might want to check it out?
Oh yeah, it's on YouTube. So
okay,
it
we
is.
We just search Ocean City
versus Somerville, New Central Jersey playoffs. That's what it'll come up as.
Go check it out. We'll see if Coach can ride the wave of the momentum of the first playoff win, freshman quarterback at the helm. So
that's right, man.
All right, Coach. It's been a lot of fun, man. I look forward to talking to you next week. Enjoy the game. Good luck, and we'll see you next week.